Yo, what's up aliens? AHEE here with another tutorial. So today we're going to be going over 10 different techniques on how to use granular synthesis within Ableton. Now if you've never heard of granular synthesis, you can think of it like sampling but with tiny grains of a sample. This is actually one of the oldest synthesis techniques dating back to 1946. This technique was popularized by Aphex Twin and then more modernly artists like G. Jones and Eprom. Let's go over how we can use this technique in Ableton. So here I'm going to use a single sample for this whole tutorial, and it's a vocal sample from my friend Defunct's sample pack on Splice. This is the original sample.
I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.
The first way that I really like to use granular synthesis is within Ableton's own warping. So we'll turn on warp here, and then we'll hit this ×2 button here in the warp modes, and we're going to stretch that out. I've hit it twice, and now we're going to switch the algorithm from beats mode to texture mode, and let's listen to that.
I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.
That right there is one of my favorite ways. Flux, if you turn it up, it randomly changes the size of the grains. If you turn it down, all the grains will be the same size. And then the grain size obviously controls the size of the grains. Unfortunately, you can't automate the grain size within Ableton, but what you can do, and I do this often, is create a new audio track and have this audio track listen to the track that is being affected. So we'll arm this, and I will just manually move the grain size, and we'll see it record.
I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.
And now we can see we've recorded it into audio. The second technique I like to use here is another warp function in Ableton, and instead of texture, we're going to go to tones, and we'll play this.
I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.
So you can see that it's sort of almost like pixelated, but overall I feel like it's not as smooth as the texture one. But you can get some pretty interesting sounds. The next one I like to use is the beats function, and this specifically has the arrows set to both ways. Now let's listen to what that sounds like. Now if you notice that it's actually looping depending upon these transients set here. If we set this to like 16th or 8th notes, you'll hear it a little bit different. If we pull down on this, this acts almost like a gate in a way. It's creating like a volume envelope after the initial transient. 16th note is pretty cool. So the fourth technique is also using beats mode, but instead of the left and right, we're going to set this to both arrows pointing to the right, and we'll put this also in transients. This gives us a different result. Super trippy. Now I'm actually going to put this on 16th notes, and let's try to listen to that. 8th notes. Pulling down that envelope. And this is fun. You can get some pretty cool like percussive elements out of things using this technique. Now the fifth technique is here using grain delay, Ableton's grain delay. Usually it comes on 100% wet, so I like to pull the dry wet down to below 50% and turn up the feedback a bit, and we'll listen to that.
I'm gonna bring it back.
It's very, very similar to a delay. It's very, very similar to a delay, but what's pretty neat is that you can mess around with the spray amount, and it gets some pretty interesting results. Also, turning off the sync and messing around with the millisecond free time delay is pretty fun too. Let's try that.
I'm gonna bring it back to the funk. 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 I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.
I think that's pretty cool. The sixth technique is using Simpler. Now, I've actually created my own Ableton instrument using this, and I'll provide a link to that below in the description. But check this out. So the first thing you'll want to do is import the sample into the simpler because it'll come up blank, and it'll just come up like this first, and you'll see this note, important press loop after loading in sample. And this is really important because otherwise you're not going to be able to get like the looping effect, which is really cool about this plugin. And so we're going to hit loop here. So it's looping there. So now over here in the macro controls, we can actually turn the grain size down, and you can see it lessens the grain. And then we can here then start to move the grain start around.
I'm gonna bring it back to the phone.
Pretty neat. And so you can actually automate these things, which is actually really useful. So let's try automating something here. Now also on this thing, I have this robot maker on here, which is pretty useful, and this gives it this whole other sound. Let's turn that on. And then the robot spread. This thing is so much fun. I love it. So for the 7th technique, we're going to use Ableton Sampler. Throw in our sample, and we're going to hit the forward arrows so it loops. Now with the sampler, you can't automate the sample start or the loop start or end start. You could use that technique where you render to a new audio file and like manually move these things. But the sampler is pretty cool because you can go here to the pitch envelope and we'll up the time to 2 octaves, and we'll have the decay up to like 16 seconds. So I'm gonna actually turn down the loop end, and we'll that one's pretty fun. So you can get some unique things using that. All right, technique number 8. Now this one requires you to have Max for Live, and this one is called Granulator II. Now this one actually works very similarly to how the simpler delay works, but it's got a bunch of extra features, and also you don't need to hit loop. So we've already imported the sample in here, and let's play it.
I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.
All right, now this knob over here allows you to change the size of the grain, and then this file position is where within the file.
Bring it back to the funk.
So it's pretty nice because then you could automate these as well.
I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.
Cool. Also in here, if you click this view button here, you'll actually go to all these filters, some EQs. You can have envelopes on here. You can actually even FM it. That one's pretty fun. You can add the envelopes to the amp. For attack and release. And we can add some filters. And we can attach this to the envelope. You can change the filter type. Yeah, there's just like way more options here within Granulator II. Oh, look here, you can actually change the shape of the grain. You can see right here. And get some funky things with that in there for sure. So for the 9th technique, this one you'll also need to have Max for Live, and you'll need to have Ableton 10 for this to work. And this is Grain Scanner. This one works very, very similarly to Granulator II, but it's just got a few extra features as well. So here's the grain size, the position of it, and scan will actually move forward or backwards through the piece. So it's essentially like an envelope.
Back to the phone.
So you even have effects in here, like this reverb. You got distortion. And then also a filter in here. And then it's got this whole crazy matrix of things that you can attach, and then also a modulation. Also here you can reverse its direction. That's pretty cool. Also you can change the pitch. Pretty fun. For the 10th technique, this is actually a third-party plugin called Palindrome by Glitch Machines. And this thing is probably the most advanced of them all because it's got 4 different samplers in here. And what I like to use this for is just going through some of their presets, which they have a ton of, and just sort of finding weird sounds and being able to render those out. It's got so many weird sounds, you can just render stuff out. That one's cool. And you can also import your own samples into this. Like we'll grab our original sample and just throw it in there. Boom. Now here you can actually turn off the amps of the other samplers and we'll just listen to our one sample. It's got the reverb down here. Got some other effects there, and then this thing is like controlling the volume and some other things. You can control the rate that's going through there. Super in-depth plugin. Definitely check it out if you haven't. So in all, I would say out of these 10 different techniques, I probably end up using the texture mode the most out of them because it's so easily accessible. Then I'll also use my simpler technique, which is pretty fun because it's easy to automate things. And then also I like to use the Granulator II and the grain scanner as well because you can automate those things. But in case y'all don't have Max for Live, then definitely using the simpler technique and the texture technique will definitely get a lot of really good results. Also using the beats mode, also sometimes doing this on basses, I get some really cool bass sounds by stretching out like an audio of a bass form and then putting in the beats mode and getting something out of that. If you guys like this, please be sure to hit like and subscribe. Maybe share this with a friend that's interested into learning more about granular synthesis. Also, in most of all my videos, I show some of my Ableton racks. I just want to show y'all a couple of these before I go. One of my favorite ones that I use is the Robot Maker. This is part of the Ableton Racks Volume 1, and so we'll play that over
I'm gonna bring it back to
the original sample.
I'm gonna bring it back to the funk. I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.
Such a cool sound. Next, I'll try throwing on some of this distortion.
I'm gonna bring it back to the funk. I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.
That one's dope. Oh, look, check it out. Megaphone Vox. Let's try that.
I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.
Yeah. A radio Vox. That's a whole different thing.
I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.
Yeah, see, it's got this, like, a little bit of dirt in there. You can actually automate it.
I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.
I do that all the time. Shift in a road. Wonder what that does on here.
I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.
That one's trippy. Oh, yeah, what's that one? It's the Alien Vocal Maker.
I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.
It's sort of like that Billie Eilish vocal effect. Let's try throwing on the crystal delay on this vocal.
I'm gonna bring it back to the funk.
And then the auto chopper on that. Look at that huge difference we got just from throwing 2 Ableton racks on there. Pretty amazing. And I'll provide a link in the description where y'all can get the Ableton racks. All right. Peace, aliens.